What is going on, everyone? I hope you're ready for a crazy week in the stock market because that's exactly what's coming. Trump is advocating to end quarterly earnings reports. Elon bought Tesla shares for the first time in over 5 years, and it was his largest insider acquisition ever, by the way. The S&P 500 set new all-time highs today, as did gold, which is on track for its best year since 1979. Get ready for an exciting day in the market tomorrow.
You guys will never guess what. Trump actually came out and advocated to end quarterly earnings reports today. And this was actually not the first time that Donald Trump has done this. He's talked about doing this in the past, as has some of the larger names in the stock market. We can see here there was a Truth Social post today where he pretty much said, subject to SEC approval, companies and corporations should no longer be forced to report on a quarterly basis, but rather on a 6-month basis. It'll save money, allow managers to focus on properly running their companies. And he's also talking about how other countries have more of a longer term outlook, like China, and there's a lot of other countries that do 6-month reporting. Nonetheless, though, this was a pretty big deal. Like I said, he's talked about this before. Here's the Truth post, or the X post, I should say, from 2018, where he did actually mention this. But this is an idea that has been even talked about by some of the larger names, like I said, Mike. We can see here, there was an op-ed by Jamie Dimon and Warren Buffett where they were actually talking about short-termism harming the economy. And at the end of the day, they want to reduce or eliminate the practice of estimated quarterly earnings and maybe go more towards a 6-month or semi-yearly basis.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting to see what will end up happening here. Like, if this did get approved, number one, I'm curious how many companies would actually opt to report earnings once every 6 months rather than once a quarter, because, it'll kind of give investors less of a clear view as to how the company's doing, which I think would actually increase volatility because there's more uncertainty. And I do know a lot of investors kind of like having, these quarterly check-ins on companies. And then another thing to keep in mind is that, if this did end up getting passed, I guess it would help companies focus a little bit more on like the long term rather than just the stock performance on a quarter to quarter basis. But yeah, definitely very interesting news.
Yeah, 100%. I feel like it's something that, like, especially whenever we look at some of these companies, like, let's say Palantir, right? It's such a big company. It's been flying to the upside. They have to do all these quarterly earnings reports. I wonder how much it would change things, if they didn't have to do it quarterly, or even if we picked a company that wasn't doing quite as hot, right? I wonder how this would affect some businesses out there. So it's pretty interesting, and it'll be an interesting topic going forward to see if the SEC does end up approving this. But Mike, there was a stock that was been going absolutely insane in the short term, and that is Tesla. We've talked about it a lot. At the end of last week, it posted 2 huge green days on Thursday and Friday, and it closed up at 3.56% today. And guess what? Big Daddy Elon is buying up shares, and he's buying them up at a pretty rapid pace as well. Like you said in the intro, it is his largest insider purchase ever, and it's worth around $1 billion.
Yeah, so this is actually the first time he purchased shares since February of 2020. So it's the first time in over 5 years. So it's clearly pretty rare to see moves like this. And I think it's so relevant because, big traders out there like Elon, big insiders, can buy shares for only one reason, and that's if they think the stock will go up, where they can sell shares for any number of reasons. Maybe Elon wants a new house, maybe he wants to sell because he thinks the stock is overvalued, or anything else, right? But when traders buy, they're buying for one reason and one reason only, and that's because they think the stock's going to go up.
Yeah, I agree. And, I can't blame Elon here. We just talked about it yesterday, Mike. There's been so much hype coming in. Optimus has brought in so much hype in the short term that we've been seeing traders push this stock through $400. Like that huge breakout this morning, finally got Tesla through that $400 level once again. And, just a few days ago, and even just a couple weeks ago, Tesla was trading at 330, 340. So, we're already through 400, hit highs of around a 430 today in pre-market. And I thought that there was actually a pretty significant setup going on with Tesla for tomorrow. I thought that the way in which that it pulled back today was actually a good sign. If we would have closed all the way up here around 430, I would think Tesla looked pretty overextended in the short term. But I really like the bounce and hold around this $400 support. And if that keeps holding into tomorrow, there could be some significant, I would say, upside opportunities, especially for scalpers. We can see here on the Bookmap, $400 is the most significant level, and there was over 100,000 shares stacked up at this at the end of the day. It's been fluctuating. Right now, it's at 99,316 just before close, but nonetheless, we can also see overhead there's some big sell walls at 425 and 430. So if we do get this good hold, of course, keep your eyes on those overhead resistances. That's actually the peak from this morning. So I'm not surprised that there are a lot of big sell walls there. And if we could end up breaking through there, I think the next big psychological level that'll be on my radar will really be 450, right? Especially with how much Tesla's been moving lately.
Yeah, and Tesla's one of those stocks where when it has momentum, it goes so parabolic because even though it sold off today from open, it still ended up 3.5% on the day. So it just goes to show you that, when this thing has news, it really does go crazy. Of course, it'll be important for it to hold some of these support levels in the short term. I think 400 being the most important one, but I think Tesla is still a stock that everyone should have on the radar, especially this week, given, number one, the price action that it has had over the past few days, and then number two, all of the news surrounding it. This stock is definitely in play, and it's one of the hottest stocks in the market.
It definitely is. And this is one of the biggest headlines out there, right? Whenever you have an insider buying this much money worth of a certain stock, it shows that there has to be some confidence there. And Elon talking about Optimus being 80% of Tesla's revenue down the line is a huge deal, right? I think that that's huge for them. And of course, there's going to be a lot of hype and news coming out with that over the years. So we'll see if Tesla can get back to its, I would say, once resurged self, right? Right now, we're starting to pop off in a pretty decent way. Man, Mike, this price action is almost reminding me of the price action from when Tesla was truly parabolic following COVID there. So it's a pretty crazy setup that Tesla's getting into. And gosh, look at some of these runs on the daily chart where Tesla would just go up for multiple months at a time.
The good old days, right? But looking more at the market right now, SPY also had some pretty good action today. It made new all-time highs. What's going on there, and what are you seeing on the charts?
Yeah, it did make a new all-time high. Most of the move, I would say, came in pre-market. Once the market opened, we did run up to around 661. At the end of the day, we did come up for kind of a test of that resistance. And I love the way in which the market actually held the 660 support range today. Now, it did end up running down to around 659.50 and bouncing off of that a couple times. But for the most part, this 659.50 to 660 range held up pretty decently. If we can break back above 661 tomorrow, I would definitely be looking for more of a breakout opportunity, kind of like what we saw this morning on the overall run that first came at open. Now, again, it might not last all day, and SPY can get a bit tricky here in the short term. We have a lot going on that's going to be influencing price action. So heading into tomorrow, we need to be a little bit aware of the overall schedule and the historical price action. I will say, Mike, if we look at some historical data from this time over the past few years, it's not the best, that's for sure.
Yeah, I would say that's actually really rough because as we know, the stock market tends to rise over time no matter what time frame you look at, September being the most bearish month of the year, but even in a more specific sense, September this year has been pretty strong, but this week that we are heading into especially has been really rough. Of course, that doesn't mean the stock market has to fall this week every single year, but over the past few years, I'm kind of surprised how bearish the data actually is.
Exactly. And, of course, there's going to be so much going on. So I'm definitely a bit worried about the price action tomorrow, especially considering that we're going to have an FOMC meeting coming up on Wednesday. We can't forget that on Wednesday at 2 p.m. Eastern time, the Feds are expected to cut interest rates. Jerome Powell will be speaking at 2:30 p.m. Eastern time, just 30 minutes after that interest rate decision. But going back to the FedWatch tool, there's a 96% chance of a rate cut, a 4% chance of a 50 basis point rate cut. So we have a 25 basis point rate cut at the 96% chance mark, a 4% chance at the 50 basis point mark. So 100% chance of a cut is being priced in. And of course, there could be some, I would say, profit taking tomorrow, as some people are worried about the event, but there could even be an opportunity where if SPY does start breaking out, maybe there's some optimism as traders are looking for those cuts, because as we know, Mike, cuts are so influential in the short term, and it's been dictating a lot of this price action.
Big time. And I'm super excited for this week, not only because we're at all-time highs, not only because we tend to see big moves in both directions around this time of the year, but also because we are at a critical point where the Fed is finally about to start cutting interest rates, and this is something that investors have been, waiting so patiently for all year long. So I think that how this next week ends up playing out is going to be very influential to like the short-term future. So tune into tomorrow's video. We're going to have a lot to talk about, especially related to this rate cut. So keep that in mind. But Tom, SPY wasn't the only thing that made new all-time highs today. Guess what else did? Gold yet again, and it actually surpassed $25 trillion in market cap for the first time in history. Gold is going insane. Prices are up around 39% year to date. It's on track for its best annual performance since 1979. What are you seeing here?
Every time that I think that gold is going to finally slow down, it proves me wrong and continues to fly up into the heavens. Today, just sitting under $340. It broke the recent high, which was very close to $338.30. So that was a good breakout to see. And something that happened actually on that breakout is that it actually held that level intraday. So if we can keep holding this into tomorrow, I'm definitely going to be looking for more bullish price action. But I think that this also just goes to show that there is some worry in the short term, right? We have to remember, why is the Federal Reserve and why is the market pricing in a 100% chance of these rate cuts? It's because of a weakening labor market. That is a pretty negative economic sign. So I don't blame people for buying up gold and wanting some safety. And hey, whenever you can say, Mike, that gold prices are up 39% year to date, it's hard not to look at it.
Yeah, exactly. And, the dollar's just losing more and more value. So there's a lot of things driving this up. And Tom, one thing that I really like to see as well is that it's not just gold. Silver is also doing is doing very well. This one had a great day. The big money play on this one is doing pretty solid too. So I would also keep an eye on SLV, because while it hasn't been as strong, or it hasn't gotten as much attention as GLD, it's one of those stocks and areas of the market that just like we said with Tesla, like when it has momentum, when it has real buying to it, it can get pretty insane.
It really can, Mike. And, GLD and SLV can go under the radar pretty easily, especially whenever you have news like Tesla or Elon Musk, buying up $1 billion worth of stock, right? Of course, GLD and SLV are probably going to go on most people's back burners, but we definitely wanted to mention these because there is a lot of good opportunities here and people have been crushing and doing very well on them in the short term. But Mike, we also can't forget about the earnings lineup for tomorrow. Again, the earnings this week is pretty slow. On Wednesday, we do have Cracker Barrel, which I think will be interesting, and then FedEx and Lennar on Thursday. But again, not the biggest earnings week out there. Definitely pay more attention to the FOMC interest rate decision coming out on Wednesday. But even tomorrow, we do have retail sales 1 hour before the market opens.
Sounds great. Well, let's get right into the good stuff then, which are some setups and predictions. And a stock that is definitely on my bullish radar is PDD, and it is to the upside. I know I've hit on this one a handful of times in recent videos, and it's still definitely on my bullish radar. Basically, there was a recent $10.2 million big money trade with this one on the 121 strike calls for October 3rd of 2025. PDD and other Chinese stocks have been doing pretty well. Now, I would even say say like other Chinese stocks like Alibaba, FXI, Baidu, BILI, and others are actually even outperforming PDD. But, when you have this area of the market, it kind of just like helps all of these stocks, generally speaking. But basically, we have been seeing more bullish price action come into PDD recently. The big money trade is an in-the-money call trade. It's a heavy $10.2 million trade with a short-term expiration, which basically means that, a trader here is positioning themselves in a pretty bullish way for the stock to increase in the short term, which is, of course, always good to have on your side. While we are seeing some recent positive Chinese developments, like how the TikTok deal is supposed to be coming towards a resolution. It's not 100% confirmed just yet, but that was some good news. Of course, there was some negative news related to NVIDIA that we'll cover today, but overall, we have been seeing a lot of bullish price action with Chinese stocks, and it's definitely a stock that is on my bullish radar going forward. This doesn't mean it has to rise tomorrow, but especially as this big money trade gets closer to expiration, I think it's a stock to keep on watch.
Me too. It was up 1.5% today, and I love that big money trade. Like, if we go back to the daily chart really fast, we can see that, we started to break out above recent highs today, which was a good sign as well. So I'll be watching for this one to play out. It's $10.2 million. We normally don't get big money trades that are that large, that's for sure. But Mike, with my first setup, I'm actually looking at ticker symbol UUUU. Now, this is in the nuclear sector. Now, almost all the nuclear stocks are popping off today, whether you look at Quad U's or Energy Fuels here, or you even go look at a few others like Oklo, which was up around 15% as well. Nano Nuclear Energy was explosive, up 12.9%, and even URA, a uranium ETF, was up 9.35% today and closed up very high as well. So a lot of good price action throughout the day. But with Energy Fuels, there's just been such a good move today as the U.S. is actually looking to boost strategic reserves for nuclear power. Now, this is a big deal. Obviously, uranium reserves have been in the news quite a bit recently, as a lot of companies have been looking to look at other options for power, right? It takes a lot of power to power a lot of the AI capabilities that, NVIDIA and a lot of these other companies end up ultimately making. I feel like that this is a sector that's been hot. We're seeing a really good move in the short term, and I'll be looking for a short-term continuation above $14.20 with UUUU. But I had to mention this sector today as it was up 15%. And, if we start to see a continuation above the recent high and up to new highs, then we could see a great continuation play in the short term. And as we know, Mike, the options on these stocks go pretty crazy as well.
Especially when the stock's up 16% and there's big news driving it. So yeah, let's keep it close on watch. Another ticker that is definitely on the radar is UPS, and it is in a bullish way. I know I mentioned this one in yesterday's video, but I definitely want to hit on it again. This is another one with a recent big money trade coming in just under $1 million with the 80 strike call options for November 21st of 2025. These call options are, fairly deep in the money. They have, a decent amount of time, nothing like too far out, but nothing like crazy short term either. And I think there is overall a good risk reward playing the bounce on this one. Right now, the stock's around $84 a share or so. You can certainly get as like tight or loose with the stop as you want, but I think like having a stop like, at this point, given today's price action, closer to like $82 a share, maybe a little bit more, maybe a little bit less, and increasing this as the day goes on or as these days progress, I think offers a positive risk reward skew, because in the event this stock does reverse, I really wouldn't be surprised to see it get closer to like 92, maybe 94, maybe 95, depending on how the the bounce ends up progressing. But either way, UPS is definitely on my bullish radar, and I'm excited to see how it does.
The long-term support that UPS is bouncing off of is pretty insane. I'll be watching it in the short term and even the longer term with the way that it's starting to get very low and a little bit advantageous, I would say, as well. With my next setup, I'm looking at Tilray, and this one's also to the upside. Now, Tilray did go a bit under the radar today. It was up 5.3%, but there were just so many growth stocks popping off. But I really like how Tilray is trying to hold $1 per share in the short term. This is actually a a pretty big psychological level, especially on a stock that's close to $1, which we don't mention here a lot on the channel, but granted, Tilray is a unique stock nonetheless. I am going to be watching for a continuation off of this and a possible bounce back up. If we go to like the 5-minute chart, we can see that recently $1.22 has provided a lot of good support and recent resistance as well. So if we could break through that, that's the area I'll be watching for a possible breakout opportunity at. And as we know, whenever the MJ stocks like Tilray start to move, they can really run.
Definitely. All right, sounds good there. And besides that, let's jump right into today's momentum plays. And with the first one, we have CoreWeave, ticker symbol CRWV, to the upside.
CoreWeave posted a great move today, up 7.6%, and it touched a good resistance. So if it can break above 125 even, then watch it up.
With the next one, we have Google, ticker symbol GOOGL, also to the upside.
Yeah, Google's moving in a pretty crazy way today. So they actually became the 4th company to join the $3 trillion club. Shout out to all the shareholders at Google. And Citigroup adjusted their price target to $280 from $225 and maintained a buy rating. And, you know, a 4.49% day out of a Mag 7 stock is definitely no joke. But if they can end up breaking above a 240, then watch them to the upside.
All right, and then with the last one, we have NVIDIA, ticker symbol NVDA, but this one is to the downside, and they had some rough news today.
They did. Unfortunately, China actually came out and said that NVIDIA violated their anti-monopoly laws after a preliminary probe. This is not the best thing to hear. Now, of course, there's a lot to be said about this, but the China's State Administration for Market Regulation said that they violated this. Now, they did not specify what they breached in the country's laws, but NVIDIA came out and said that we comply with the law in all respects. So, either way, NVIDIA sounds pretty good here. Nonetheless, their stock ended up falling down today. And if tomorrow we can pull back below 176.50, a pretty key short-term support, then watch it to the downside.
Sounds good. So we have these 3 stocks on the radar for potential continuations tomorrow, if and only if they break through the levels listed. These stocks are trending strongly. They're moving a lot right now. And if they can continue, these can be even extended runs. But as always, how you trade is much more important than what you trade. Protect your capital above all else and focus on making smart, long-term oriented trading decisions. You can learn all about this for free in the Key Lessons channel of the StockedUp Discord. But besides that, Tom, it is now about that time for today's $3.3 million big money trade. And we are looking at ticker symbol ET. Today, more specifically, we are looking at the 15 strike call options that expire on January 21st of 2028. So this one's a little bit more of a longer term one, but stick with us. It's a $3.3 million trade. ET is one of the largest and most diversified energy companies in North America. And basically, the trader here is buying, deep in the money call options that have a lot of time to them, because they are looking to capitalize off of a broader uptrend. If we zoom out on ET's chart, we can see the stock has been doing especially well ever since COVID, but over the past few months, it has definitely started to pull back, and it looks like, the trader here is, positioned themselves to make money off that. I like how these call options are in the money. I like how there's time to them. The only thing I'll say is, if you're someone who is not willing to give a trade time, then this trade's probably not for you.
Yeah, definitely not. Going out to January of 2028, you're going to have to be very patient with this. Now, this would be perfect if you're somebody looking for kind of a set it and forget it style of trade. Now, of course, I don't think you should ever necessarily forget a trade, as you should always be smart and have stop losses and, of course, look at risk in a very smart way. But nonetheless, I like this setup, and I feel like it's also in a pretty crazy wedge formation starting to happen here. It's been in an overall downtrend in the short term. If we go to like a 1 hour chart and we zoom out a little bit, you can see how these overall wicks line up a lot better. And on this downtrend, I am going to be watching it very closely as it gets to the end of this wedge. You know, if we start to see a good breakout up and above the wedge, I am going to be watching it extremely closely. And I also think that there's a good risk reward ratio here if you can use like $17 or just under there as a stop. Again, like in the event that this stock does end up blasting off, I think that you could target recent highs, maybe closer to $18.70, maybe even $19, you know, if we could get up and get a real run going. Again, you could keep your stop just under 17 and your risk reward could be right around 2 or just under and still be pretty solid. So overall, I like the setup. Again, though, you have to be able to give it time.
There we go. And let's also give a giant shout out to today's member of the day, KT Options in the Stocked Up Discord, who had some great gains today with Google. So huge shout out to you and keep up the great work going forward. If you are someone who's in the short-term trading, definitely consider obliterating that subscribe button so you can get our videos recommended to you more often. Every single day we cover multi-million-dollar big money trades, the most important news, information, chart setups, earnings, and everything you need to know about the stock market in around 20 to 25 minutes or less. Sometimes we go over, sometimes it's shorter. Basically, we cover everything you have to know in the stock market. We do hours worth of research to make these videos nice, enjoyable, and useful. If you subscribe, you'll get our videos recommended to you more often. But if you're into short-term trading, definitely make sure to check out that link down below to get full access to the X-Ray Vision Bookmap like we showcased with Tesla today. Basically, it shows you exactly where key buy and sellers are so you can know key pivotal areas for support and resistance, and also points where breakouts can be especially strong or weak, among so many other things that are available on the Bookmap platform. We showcase Bookmaps in basically every single video, and it's extremely useful. And as a Stocked Up viewer, you can save if you use the link down below. A special offers icon will appear towards checkout, and you can save quite a bit, and it's a pretty good deal. So definitely check it out, especially ahead of Fed rate cut week. But thank you all so much for watching. We have a very exciting week ahead of us, and let's crush it in the stock market tomorrow.